So look, hey, let's make a start. So yeah, you're very welcome. Back to this is the kind of bonus week five. So good to see you all. What we're going to do this evening is we're going to look at the middle way. I'm going to talk a little bit about the middle way as a way of approaching problems and difficulties, and then we'll do some meditation as we normally would. But then we have a break, and then again there'll be an opportunity to ask questions after the break, and then I'll do a little bit more. I'll say a little bit more about three essential principles or three essential aspects of yeah meeting the challenges of life, and then we'll have breakout rooms. So the breakout rooms will be towards the end of the evening, so there'll be plenty of opportunity to tune in with each other and discuss what I'm going to introduce, and then we'll finish at 9 as normal. So yeah, again, just to remind you where we've come from, the ground that we've covered. So if you remember back on week 1, so 4 weeks ago, we looked at ethics. So we looked at just the basic ethical principles of love and kindness, or metta, generosity, contentment, truthfulness, and mindfulness, and how if we remember those principles and bring those principles particularly into our working life, things will just go a lot better for us and for other people. And I mean, maybe one way of talking about that is just a kind of avoiding getting tangled up in things. I heard a talk recently from a guy who's quite involved really in Triratna. He's got kind of a central role or a central responsibility in terms of our whole movement internationally, actually. And he was just talking about he kind of buggered something up, frankly, and he was quite open about it. And I was just really struck by he was just in a bit of a bad mood, and he wrote an email, and I was just really struck by he's still kind of tidying up the consequences of a moment, an intemperate moment. I was really struck by that. So we can, particularly if we're in a position of some influence, we can have quite a strong effect, and we really need to watch out for what we're doing and the way that making sure that what we do is doing is an expression of positive mental states. So he was just reflecting just that very, very basic teaching of that it's, very, very important to be in positive mental states, whatever you're doing, but particularly if you're in a position of some responsibility. But that was week 1. And then in week 2, we looked at, we looked at the 5th precept on mindfulness and different aspects of mindfulness, and also meditation, and how meditation is essentially about developing positive mental states, developing an uninterrupted stream even of skillful mental states, and how we need to start looking at how we can do that in the midst of our working life, and really getting to grips with what our mind does in the midst of our work, or the tasks that we're engaged in. So we looked at wisdom in week 3. So we looked at taking a perspective on what goes on in our life that's going to help us to see it more for what it really is. And we also saw that if we look at things in a way that's unhelpful, if we think about things in an unhelpful way, from a kind of mistaken or deluded perspective, we end up getting in these tangles. So wisdom is about looking at things, about developing a perspective that's going to help us to see things more truly and to help us to liberate ourselves from unhelpful patterns. Particularly, we looked at the 3 lakshanas, the 3 marks of conditioned existence, and how that if we see that what arises in our experience is impermanent, and because it's impermanent, it's unsatisfactory, it can't provide us with ultimate satisfaction. If we see that, again, we'll be able to respond creatively to whatever life throws at us. And then in week 4, we looked at the 3rd of those lakshanas, the 3rd characteristic, which is insubstantiality, which is this very central idea in the Dharma and the Buddhist teaching that there are no enduring selves or no enduring substances that lie behind the flow of phenomena. So there's nothing kind of fixed within or behind or underneath what the flow of life that we're living. So the doctrine is in Sanskrit is called the Anatman doctrine, the not self doctrine. And we saw that it's not much that we don't have a self, it's that we always have a new self. So Buddhism's got this very dynamic vision of reality, this very dynamic vision of the way things are. And we saw that if the new self is more or less the same as the old self, then there's no development. But if the new self is a fuller unfolding of the old self, then we can say that spiritual development is taking place. So what you've got is within this dynamic flow of life, you've got this tendency of things to just go around in circles, driven by habit. And then you've got this tendency of things to develop, driven by inspiration and confidence and trust that there's something beyond the conditioned world, which is what the three jewels represent. I'll say more about them later on. And last week we also saw that if we want to see through the illusion of a fixed selfhood, if we want to liberate ourselves, we need to break what are known as the three fetters. So the first of them is the belief in an essential, unchanging self, which you can say is the fetter of habit. So it's that assumption we make that because the new self is much like the old self, we assume that there's actually something there that remains unchanging through time. That's the assumption that we make. So that's the fixed view of self, or the belief in an essential, unchanging self. And when we experience that as just the force of habit, it's so much easier to do something you've done before than it is to do something that you haven't done before. The way we break through that fetter is through developing creativity. And coupled with that habit, that belief in an unchanging self, is attachment to rites and rituals as ends in themselves. So we just go through the motions. We can't quite remember why we do what we do, but it just gives us a sense of sort of security that just to repeat the old thing that we've always done. So that can be characterized as superficiality. It's just not really going beneath the surface of things, and just, like I say, going through the motions. It's something that, again, like this time last year, I think a lot of these kinds of attachments to rites and rituals become exposed, because when you can't do the thing that you normally do because it's no longer possible, you have to go a little bit deeper. And actually, I think if there's one good thing about this whole COVID, I was going to say trauma, is that it does make us think a little bit more deeply about what our life is about, because we can't just go through the motions. It's not possible. But anyway, that's one of the first fetters that we need to break to develop wisdom. Is the attachment to rites and rituals as ends in themselves, which we can think of as superficiality, which we break through with commitment. So when we commit ourselves to something, when we really go deeply into something, we sort of go under the surface. We delve a little bit more deeply, and we become to see what's really going on a little bit more truly. The third fetter that we need to break to develop wisdom is doubt and indecision, which is not a rational doubt. It's not having a genuine question. What it means is an unwillingness to commit to a particular course of action, an unwillingness to decide that I'm going to do this and not that. So it's characterized by vagueness, a lack of real clarity, or a lack of decision. And it's broken, the fetter is broken with clarity. So again, we talked about that last week in relation to work, how we can remain in a state of vagueness, particularly not deciding what we're doing. We can kind of do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. It's quite easy to do without really being clear about what's most important and what we really need to get to grips with. So yeah, we looked a little bit about how all of these manifest in terms of our working life. Hopefully you've had some reflections about this. It's impossible to give all the implications. So what I've tried to do is just to give you the principle and hope that you reflect on the implications, both on your own, but also hopefully in the groups that we've been having. So this week I wanted to look at, what I'll do is I'll just talk for a little while and then we'll do some meditation. Maybe actually what I'll do before I do that is I'll just stop and just see if there's any questions about any of that, what I've just said, anything from the previous weeks. If you have a question, just unmute yourself and go ahead. I'm partly asking because I know I've thrown quite a bit of material at you over the last few weeks. So I'm going to interpret your silence as complete understanding. You've totally caught everything. You totally understand it, which is great. So I'll just talk a little bit about one question that came up. I think it was last week this question came up. And it was about communication. And it was particularly in this area of communicating difficulty with one's boss. Now, what became clear, it was Colin who asked that question. I don't know if he's here tonight. I haven't seen him. Was basically, you've got something difficult that you need to say to somebody in your working environment. Let's say it's your boss. That was the question that he asked. And you can get into a situation where you get caught between two different outcomes. So either you don't say something, so something that you're really, really not happy about, maybe that you're something that you're aggrieved by. So one option is that you don't say anything. Now, if you take that option, you'll probably just feel resentful and it'll be difficult for you to engage with your work, difficult for you to engage with the other people because you feel resentful. On the other side, the other hand, the other option is that you tell your boss what you think, and that makes your life difficult because having criticized your boss, they're going to come down on you quite heavily and make your working life quite difficult. So what you've got there is you've got two extremes. One is say everything you think. One is don't say anything that you think. And very often, this is the way life is presented to us. It's like we can either do this thing or we can do that thing. We've got a choice between two extremes. Now, this very much ties in with with something that's really, really basic to the Buddha, actually, and the Buddha's life and the Buddha's quest. So you might be aware that the Buddha wasn't born the Buddha. He wasn't born an awakened being. So that's quite important. So the Buddha started out as a human being, and he was deeply dissatisfied with life. He saw the lakshana of unsatisfactoriness, of dukkha, of pain. He thought there's just something about life which is just not right, really not right, deeply not right. And he tried to find a solution to that problem that he had. And he really went for it, as we say. He really went for it. He was uncompromising and wholehearted in his quest for a solution to dukkha, or unsatisfactoriness, old age, sickness, and death. That's how it's sometimes described. And he went on a quest. And the way he describes that is, well, first of all, he describes self-mortification. So this process of trying to subjugate, trying to kind of repress or suppress the body and all of the desires of the body. So he was apparently famous for his austerities. Um, and then he realized that that wasn't the way to go. Now, previously in his life, before he went forth, before he left um, to become a wandering mendicant, he lived at home in a palace, and every type of pleasure was available to him. Every type of comfort, every kind of sensual delight, both of the sort of bodily and also the aesthetic variety were available to him. And he realized that that wasn't satisfying to him. Even though he had all this pleasure and all this luxury, it wasn't satisfying to him. And then he left home and he went to the absolute opposite extreme. And he realized that that wasn't going to help him either. Ultimately, he was just going to die, and that wasn't going to solve the problem. So he discovered what he came to call the Madhyama Marga, the middle way. He saw that the path that was needed to attain awakening was a middle way between those two extremes of self-mortification on the one hand and indulgence and luxury on the other. So that's how he talked about it in his first teaching to his disciples. But we can actually, I think, take that principle, the principle of the middle way, and apply it in all the different circumstances of our life. So often what happens is when we think in terms of extremes. We think in terms of, well, either I seethe with resentment, or I let fly at my boss and I discharge my resentment, but I have to get all this flack from the other side. So it's quite useful, I think, to recognize that. Recognize when we're in a situation where just making more effort won't give a solution to the problem. Yeah. So sometimes we've got a problem in our work or in our life, and we can solve it by just putting it forth more effort. So, for example, I was just thinking about, if let's say you've got a lot of work on, you've just got like a lot of emails that have banked up, and you just think, right, okay, for the next 2 hours, I'm just going to get through all these emails. And you just apply yourself when you just get through all your emails. And yeah, just through a sort of force of effort, by applying, continuity of purpose that we talked about a few weeks ago, you can just get through the things you need to get through. So that's a situation, where you just need to make more effort. But then there's other situations where just making more effort isn't going to solve the issue. So what you can do is you can actually make a distinction between what you could call a problem and what you could call a difficulty. So a difficulty is something where you just need to make more effort to overcome it. A problem is a situation where, in a way, you have to rise above the duality that you're in. Like, either I do this or I do that. You have to rise above it and find a middle way, a new way of being that doesn't fall into either of those two extremes. So probably, again, it's impossible to know in terms of Colum's example, because he's not here. But I can imagine if this is where metta is really important. Metta, the quality of metta, well, all the precepts really. If you're able to bring those qualities to bear on that situation, you'll find where the middle way is. You'll be able to, for example, in that situation, communicate. Another kind of duality or extreme that we fall into is like people who are being led, and then the leader. You have people being led, and then you have their leader. And cooperation is a way of, in a way, finding something where you resolve those two extremes with another factor. So I just wanted to introduce that idea of making that distinction, because I think often we get into trouble because we have a genuine problem, but we just relate to it as a difficulty, and we keep making effort, and the effort that we make doesn't help us resolve the problem. What we need to do is try and find some space. So try and find some space where we're both clarifying the terms of what the problem is, and also creating a space where something new can come into the situation. Are you kind of getting what I'm? Are you kind of getting me here? Yeah. So yeah. So the question is, well, how do you do that? Um, how do you create that space? So one way we really, and this is particularly, I think, is just stop thinking about what the problem is, what your problem is, and just experience what it feels like. I think sometimes we often try and think our way out of problems when we need to just let go of trying to solve it rationally and sort of just feel our way into it. Now, the best way I know of doing this is by going on a retreat. When I go away on a retreat, I'm partly saying this because it's going to be possible soon to go away on retreats. Um, when you go on a retreat, you can just drop whatever's rolling in your life, whatever challenges you have, whatever conundrums you have or dilemmas you have. You can just forget about them, engage with the retreat. And what often happens, sort of almost magically, is you discover what you need to do just by engaging with the retreat, by meditating, by um, reflecting on, well, the three lakshanas, by being with friends. You can find a way to find a path, find that middle way for you in that particular situation. um, Meditation is another really, really good way of doing it. Often I think what can happen is we can use our meditation as extra time to think about our dilemmas, but again, often we can just get stuck in a kind of a pattern which will often manifest as a hindrance. So, again, I think with meditation, it's really good if you can just to kind of drop whatever's going on, engage with the practice. And what I often find, and I know other people do as well, is when you come back to your problem after having meditated, there can be something new that will emerge into the dilemma, into the situation, some kind of new factor where you'll think, that's what I need to do. I'll say a little bit more about how we can respond a little bit later on, but I just wanted to focus on meditation for the moment. So we just in a way let go of thinking about the problem, trying to solve the problem through effort, and just open up some space where we can hopefully become a bit clearer about what the terms of the problem are, and find some sort of middle way that resolves the extremes, that oscillation between this thing or that thing that we often get stuck into. So hopefully you've kind of caught what I'm trying to say. What did you have a question, Jean? No, no, no. I just um, so let's actually just do a little bit of meditation. So we'll just do a little bit of meditation. Hopefully, I can through the practice, so as it were, demonstrate what I'm talking about. So just taking the time that you need to relax. And whatever's running in your mind, if there is something kind of running on in your mind, some particular conundrum or problem, a feeling of pressure, a feeling of not being able to respond to all the demands that are being made of you because you don't have or don't feel you have the space or the presence of mind to meet the demands, just letting all that fall away. Now that's obviously easier said than done. So part of the way that we can do that is just by beginning to pay it without forcing anything out, just by beginning to pay attention to what is happening presently. So rather than pushing anything away, we're just changing our attention, changing the focus of our attention. We can change the focus of our attention just to the immediate sense of being in the room that we're sitting in. So we can listen to sound. And noticing the way that sound comes from somewhere. It gives us a sense of being in space. And also we have a sense of our body existing in space. So attending to sound, attending to our body doesn't require a thought. It doesn't require a thought to attend to our immediate sensuous experience. For example, the simple experience of the touch of our feet against the floor or against what we're sitting on. The touch of our knees. Touch of our knees against our clothing. The touch of our thighs against our clothing. The weight of our bum pressing down onto what we're sitting on. The pelvis, the genital region. The lower belly pressing against our belt or our waistband. The chest and the shoulders. The skin of our chest and our shoulders, our belly and our back as it brushes against our clothing as we breathe. The arms, the hands, the neck and the throat. So what's the experience that corresponds to the word? Scalp, forehead, eyes, nose, cheeks, mouth, so checking that you're not kind of gripping hold of your physical experience, grasping at it. You're just allowing your body to be there with a kind of spacious, curious awareness. So now getting a sense of the whole of your body with all its different sensations, its different parts. And beginning to tune into what your body does as you breathe. Again, not grabbing hold of the breath. Imagine that the breath is a very, very, very quiet piece of music that starts off very quietly, and you're just beginning to tune into it as it emerges from the silence. So listening to what your body does as you breathe. Feeling what your body does as you breathe. And paying particular attention to your exhalation. And notice that when you exhale, your body releases. So if there's a sense of contraction, restriction, or tension, seeing if you can soften it by tuning into that natural release that happens with the exhalation. And appreciating that moment at the end of the exhalation where just for a moment nothing happens. There's just silence and spaciousness. If you want, you can place a count at that end of the out breath. You can place a count at that moment of stillness just to help you connect and stay connected. If you want, if your mind is a bit buzzy and a bit heady, concentrate on the sensations low down in the abdomen. Really feeling the way that your body moves as you breathe. Softening in the diaphragm and the belly. And then concentrating on the in-breath. When we breathe in, our lungs fill with air. And with that air comes a sense of spaciousness, lightness, even energy. And again, if you wish, you can accentuate that by counting just before the in-breath in the normal way. And if thoughts arise in your mind, notice if they lead to a constriction or whether they lead to an expansion, a clenching or a softening. And then letting go of the focus on the in-breath and the counting, and just be with the breath, the in-breath and the out-breath. And if there are qualities of opening, of spaciousness, of relaxation and ease as you breathe, just giving your attention to those aspects or those qualities, allowing them to expand. If there's an ongoing sense of conflict or tension, seeing if you can expand around it, hold it in a bigger container, as it were. Remembering that life is already a flow, is already dynamic. And if we let go, we feel that more deeply. We know that more deeply. So now let go of focusing your attention on your breathing. And just be with the breadth of your experience. So just resting in the fact of being aware. Allowing whatever arises to arise, whatever passes away to pass away. So just sitting. So we're going to finish the meditation in a moment. Seeing if you can keep connected to that sense of spaciousness as you move into the break. Or in the tantric tradition, they call bridging the gap. In other words, bridging the gap between your meditation and the activities of your life. So sometimes just in the simple act of letting go and returning to what it was that we were engaged in or that we had a dilemma about, we can find a new way of approaching what we're doing. And in a large part, that's what our meditation brings, as well as integration, positive emotion. Meditation can also bring perspective. It can provide just a practice that can refresh our perspective on things. So we'll have a break now. And if you've any questions, do please ask. Either putting them in the chat, or you can just ask. And just to remind you as well that two things, that in 2 weeks' time there's a course starting. It's called Who Hates the Metta Bhavana? It's a bit of a cheeky title, but it's acknowledging the fact that for a lot of people the Metta Bhavana is really tricky, and a lot of people don't like it. A lot of people find it actually a bit painful. So this course is about Stephen's just put the link in the chat box there if you want to click on it. But yeah, it's about, well, if you find it difficult, trying to find an approach that works. For most of us, frankly, we just push too hard. We're too forceful. And the course is about, in a way, relaxing the effort that we're making and finding an effort that's more appropriate. If you love the practice and you want to find out more about it, go more deeply into it, it'll also do that for you. So it's just about really getting to grips with what's really going on in the Metta Bhavana and actually really uncovering the kind of mystery of it. It's quite a strange practice, really. It's a bit sort of magical, but it needs a bit of space for that magic to emerge. So if you're interested in a deeper exploration of Metta Bhavana practice, then come along. Hopefully there'll be a bunch of us from this course that will carry on into that course. So you might see some of your friends. So that starts on the 25th, which is in a fortnight. So you have a week break on a Tuesday, and then it'll start again on the 25th at 7 o'clock. So I wanted to say that, and I also wanted to remind you that at the moment we're doing all of our events for free. And what we're trying to do, you could say, what the Dublin Buddhist Centre is trying to do is just to kind of create a bit of space in people's lives so that people can develop a bit more perspective, develop a little bit more awareness, a bit more kindness. We're trying to open up that space, and it's quite difficult to do that, as we all know. There's so much that you have to work against. So one of the things you're trying to work against all the time is just finance, trying to keep enough money coming in to keep the show on the road, so to speak. So if you appreciate what we're doing, please support what we're doing by giving a donation. And if you want to do that ongoingly, you can do a standing order, which is where you give a certain amount of money per month. That's just really brilliant when we have those standing orders, because it means we've got a bit more confidence moving forward. We can be bolder in terms of what we want to do in terms of our program and in terms of staff to work for the centre and so on. So I just wanted to ask you, just on this last night of the course, just to kind of reflect on, just to consider that, just to sort of consider it, because we really do completely rely. We've got a bit of support from the government with wage subsidies and so on at present. I don't know how much longer that's going to last, but other than that, we completely rely on people's generosity. We're totally reliant on it for everything that we do. So anyway, I've said my bit. So we'll have a break now. Let's just come back at 8:10, and we'll carry on with a further exploration. Okay, so we'll make a start. So we've got one question from Monica from earlier on, and she says, "How can one develop clarity?" Which is a big question, actually. I mean, the classical answer to that is to study and reflect on the Dharma. So what actually happens when we do that? What happens when we study the Dharma is we start realizing what we actually think. So it's almost like, to develop clarity, first of all, we need to know what the views are that we already hold. And very often when we study the Dharma, it's as if it throws those views into sharp relief. We realize, that's what I think, or that's the prejudice I have about this, or that's the assumption I make about that. So the Dharma, the kind of clarity of the Dharma itself, the light of it, sort of illuminates or throws into relief those areas of unclarity in our own mind, or areas where we know that we haven't got things quite right. And again, what you start noticing is that those habits are just that, they're habits. There's those ways of looking at things are things that you often just revert to. You have a kind of a default mode. And often the default mode will be an attitude, maybe of irritation, or an attitude of a kind of craving or longing for something that you don't have, or jealousy, or you might have a sort of default mode that you go to, and there might be a view that kind of underpins that. And some of them can be quite deep, which is why Dharma practice is difficult. It's because we're working against deeply held habits that are not just emotional but are cognitive, are related to the way we understand things. But that is the way that you develop clarity. And another way you develop clarity, I think, is by trying to communicate. By trying to really communicate what it is that you think and feel about things. That's part of the reason why we do these discussion groups, because it's often in the course of communicating what you think that you find out what you think. And that's one of the ways. I'll mention this again in a moment. But one of the ways that we can find out what the terms of our problem are. I mentioned earlier how this distinction between a difficulty, where you just need to make more effort, and a problem, which is where you need to kind of rise to a higher level, where those extremes don't exist anymore. And sometimes we need to find out, or we need to clarify with somebody else what the terms of our problem are. Where you say to someone, well, I can either do this or I can do that, and neither are very good. And somebody else can often help us reflect on finding another way of approaching things, which is neither of those extremes, which is a sort of synthesis that can help us find that new way, that middle way within the particulars of our life. So that's just a wee bit about clarity. Hopefully that's clarifying. And then Casey says, related to what you were saying last week about noticing moments that things don't go according to plan, expectations we have, any tips for being kind to that part of you that can be quite disappointed when this happens? So I think it's interesting, isn't it? So we're not saying don't be disappointed, because when you notice that you're disappointed, you're disappointed. It's already happened. You've already been disappointed. So I think part of it probably is just actually about just acknowledging that that's actually happened. That just, oh, that's not quite the way I expected things to happen. I mean, I was just thinking I've got a really kind of everyday example. So um, I ordered my phone is just, you get to a point where your phone just starts dying, and it got to the point last week where I just couldn't charge it anymore. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just get a new phone, just get on with it, get a new phone. So I ordered a phone, and of course it didn't arrive. um, and it was just really interesting noticing, like, I was quite looking forward to just having a phone that works. And there was a slight sense, I mean, a bit starved of excitement at the moment, but I thought, oh, I can get a new phone. Slightly embarrassed to admit, but I was just excited about getting a new thing. Um, there's my latent consumerism, but anyway, but of course it didn't. I got a text message on Friday saying FedEx will deliver your package today, and then it didn't come on Friday, and then I got another one yesterday. It said your package will arrive today, but it was just interesting noticing how I responded to those not terribly disappointing, but just sort of mildly irritating disappointments. And then, of course, I got a message to say that the phone had been delivered and that I'd signed for it. And it hadn't been delivered and I hadn't signed for it. And then I had to ring FedEx and be on hold. And all that stuff, we've all done it. And just, I was just noticing. And the thing that I noticed was just annoyance. So I mean, that's what Metta Bhavana is about. Metta Bhavana is learning how to be kind when annoying things happen. I mean, that's really what it's about. It's practicing. It's almost like often we just don't notice that we're disappointed even. So part of it is just actually noticing, oh, that's disappointing. But another thing that can happen is there's an attitude that we have is this shouldn't be happening. That's what's really interesting, is that we've got an idea about what should happen, and then when life doesn't conform to it, we have this thought, this shouldn't be happening. And it's really weird, because what you're doing is we actually think that life should conform to our desires. It's really weird that we should think that, but that's what we really think that. And then we get annoyed. We get sometimes really annoyed. So I think as part of it, I think is just learning to notice all of that. And yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I can say much more than that. You're smiling, Casey? Does that mean that, like, did you have something more to add, or
Oh no, thanks. No, that was really helpful, actually.
was it?
Yeah, because actually, what I noticed, actually, one thing is kind of what you're saying there, is that I noticed there was a part of me that was maybe giving myself a bit of a hard time
Ah,
for,
yeah.
I guess, for building the expectations in the
Ah,
first
yeah,
place.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Like
yeah,
almost
yeah.
and it's probably related to what you said there about that this shouldn't be happening or something. Like, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say, actually. It just went out of my head. But so the next thing that happens, I mean, it doesn't happen in a sequence, but a kind of accompanying thing is this shouldn't be happening. And then we think, well, whose fault is it? So we immediately get into blame. And that blame can be directed towards ourselves. So we think, if I wasn't so stupid and so acquisitive and greedy, I wouldn't mind if the phone arrived or it didn't arrive, if you see what I mean. Do you know what I mean? And so then we blame ourselves, which is harder to spot. If we blame somebody else, we might think, oh, don't do that, Yanadara. That's hatred. That's bad news. But when it goes inwards, it can be harder to spot, and we might even think that that's okay. I think that's a really common view that's really deeply problematic, is that we feel that it's okay to blame ourselves and hate ourselves. It's really awful, actually. But we do actually think that, a lot of us, completely unconsciously. That's our attitude. That's our view. going back to what I was saying a couple of weeks ago about views. But you just have to keep noticing it. I think it's important to just trust that deepening awareness will unravel some of these problems. I talked about problems earlier, and they will be resolved through awareness, just a constant application of awareness. And of course, metta is awareness that's imbued with patience and love and tolerance and so on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you. That's really helpful. Yeah.
Is that, yeah, good.
And I
Yeah.
hope you get your phone soon.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. Cool. All right. So thanks for the questions. So yeah, I was saying earlier, just about how it can help to make a distinction as between a problem and a difficulty when we just need to apply ourselves more and just be more committed, and when it's where we need to sort of open up and try and find some space where some new kind of element, some new idea, some new course of action can enter into um, our life. And I wanted to talk about that in relation to three really, really fundamental things, if you can call them things. And those are the three jewels: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So I wanted to talk about them in relation to this particular issue, if it's an issue. So the Buddha, as I mentioned, the Buddha found the middle way, and then he communicated that to other people. So there's this lovely text that we have. It's like a poem by a man called Pingia, who is a disciple of the Buddha, and it's quite a beautiful expression of him encountering the Buddha and his feeling for the Buddha, how much love he has for the Buddha and confidence he has in the Buddha. And at one point he says, before I heard Gautama's teaching, before I heard the Buddha's teaching, people always told me this. This is how it has always been, and this is how it will always be. So we can have that kind of feeling, can't we? Like we get stuck in a pattern and we just have this feeling, well, this is how it's always been, and this is how it will always be. Now, what happened to Pingia is he encountered the Buddha, and the Buddha demonstrated it's not through an idea or an image, but through his person, through his actual being, that there was a possibility, there was another way of being. So Pingia knew that actually that wasn't the case, that it had been this way up till now, but there was actually a different way of being. So that's really what the Buddha represents. The Buddha represents this conviction that we can connect with, that there's a different way of being in the world. That's the most essential element of the Buddha. That the Buddha, as I said earlier, was born as we are born. The Buddha was a human being. The Buddha started from the same place that we start from. And just knowing that because we're a human being, we have that potential within us. It's like the Buddha, of course, famously saw humanity as like a bed of lotus flowers in different stages of unfoldment. So if we can connect with that, it brings a sense of space. If we just feel like all we are is who we are now, and that's all we'll ever be, it contracts us. So when you kind of have a meeting with the Buddha, it can blow that completely wide open. So we can connect through to the Buddha in different ways. We can connect through concepts. So we can talk about the Buddha's wisdom, and in a way, we did that a bit over the last couple of weeks. So trying to look at the world the way the Buddha would look at it, and the way the Buddha talked about it. There's also, so that's one way of connecting with the Buddha, by conceptually trying to understand through concepts and ideas and qualities that he possesses. There's also images. So that we have this image of the Buddha here, and it's quite. I always feel like it's really important when you're doing a Dharma event of any kind to have an image of the Buddha. So just the fact that he's here it says something. And traditionally when we meet, and the shrine is in the middle of the room. It's probably hard if you've not been to the Buddha Center, you won't know this, but the Buddha is always there in the middle of the room, and that says something about what the nature of the meeting is, what the nature of the get together is. That it's around this fact of our potential for awakening. So there's images, and then there's sound. So the Buddha has a mantra. A mantra is like a sound symbol of his qualities. And it's also, all mantras really are like symbols or sound symbols that connect us with our own potential for awakening. It's so easy to say that, but it's really quite a profound thing. So when we recite a mantra, it can bring a sense of expansion. And the beautiful thing about mantras is you can do them subvocally. You can do them out loud. You can say Om Mani Padme Hum, or you can say it in your heart. I just did it and you didn't hear it. But so the beautiful thing about that is you can do that anywhere. You can recite a mantra just any time during the day. And that can bring something. It can bring a sense of space. I quite like doing it if I'm walking somewhere, particularly if there's a lot going on in my mind. If I just try and remember the mantra. And interestingly, one of the meanings of the word mantra is that which protects the mind. So it protects the mind because when you're thinking of the Buddha, it kind of pushes out unskillful thoughts. And it connects you with which is what's most essential in you, which is good and true and real, and it's not something other than us. It's deeply part of our nature. So I wanted to mention that because I know for some people mantra is really important, and why not do a few mantras when you get to work? You can just sit there and look at your desk and recite a few mantras, and recite them in your coffee break, and just have that rolling around in your mind and in your heart. Now, some of you might think that sounds like crazy talk. So if you do, it's not compulsory. but I just wanted to mention that first of all, that whatever way you think of the Buddha, and whatever way you connect with that sense of your own sort of dignity and self-respect, then do it. Whatever way you do that, do it. But I'm just suggesting that mantra is one traditional way of doing that. So that's the first of the three jewels, which helps us remember how we can access that sense of spaciousness, that sense of something coming into our experience from outside, as it were. There's also the Dharma itself, the principle and the practice. So just remembering, you can just remember, bring to mind impermanence, loving kindness. It's never a bad idea to be kind. It's never a bad idea to be aware. It's never a bad idea to be generous. It's never a bad idea to be truthful, although it's not as simple as it sounds. Do you sort of see what I mean? Like just remembering those things and applying them in your life. That's the difficult bit. And that's where the Sangha comes in. So when we communicate with other people who are similarly committed, what we can do is we can, as it were, customize the Dharma to our circumstances. That's a really, really hard thing. So we know what the Dharma says. We've been hearing about it. We've read about it. It's like, oh yeah, impermanence, heard that before. But then when we live our life, it's like there's a disconnect. We don't live according to those truths. We don't know how to apply that fact in the vicissitudes of our life. So in this good Sangha communication enables that to happen. So we can communicate with people who know us ideally, and try and get to grips with what the dilemma is. That's part of what they can help us with. It's like clarifying what the problem actually is. Sometimes we don't even know what the terms of the problem are. We just feel frustrated. So they can help us to find out what the terms of the problem are, and then help us facilitate, it will kind of catalyze a kind of communication where we realize, that's what I need to do. That's what I need to do in order to find that middle way. And furthermore, what good communication can do is remind us when we ourselves forget. So sometimes we know what we need to do, but we just don't do it. but our friends might help us to remember. That can be a very gentle thing, or it can be a bit maybe a bit stern at times. Um, and So I just wanted to mention that about. I mean, that's just one aspect of the Sangha jewel, but I think it's really important to help us clarify what our dilemmas or our dilemma is, and help us discover what we need to do, how we might apply the precepts, mindfulness, um, a wisdom perspective to the particular challenges that our life is throwing at us. So hopefully that's of some benefit, and hopefully you can see how that might be applied in the particulars of your life. What we'll do now is we'll just have a chance to discuss all of that, anything that has come up this evening in our groups. So just to say that some of the groups, not all the people who are leading the groups are here tonight. So like, for example, Dolores is on retreat. So let me just see if I can remember. So Claire is going to take Tony's group. Yeah. So you don't need to, just if you're in Tony's group, in the Lily White group, just join the group, and Claire will also join. And if you're in Dolores's group, Stephen, I think, is going to take that group. Is that right, Stephen?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, terrific. And I think everybody else, if you just go where you normally go, you'll be okay. Is that right, Stephen?
Yeah, the names will all be the same as usual.
So you just choose the name that you normally choose, but you just might end up with a different person. Yeah. So I'm just giving you a heads up, and we'll do that for 25 minutes. Okay. So here we all are again. Oh, I've just been spotlighted. It's always a bit of a shock. Can you hear me? Okay. Oh yeah, you can. Yeah, it's always sometimes that happens. You get spotlighted, and all of a sudden you're looking at yourself, and it's a bit of a shock. But anyway, it's been a real pleasure actually doing this course with you all, and do another one. Like I said, I'll be here again, and well, hopefully a number of us will be here actually in a couple of weeks' time, to really, to go more deeply into metta and what that metta bhavana and what all that is and what it means and how we do it. There's also, actually, I just remembered there's another course that Vajrashura is doing. It's on reflection. That's coming up soon. Any live retreats coming up? Yeah, I did say that earlier. It was probably slightly improper of me to say that. Like, we haven't got any plans to do a live face-to-face retreat. Well, the next retreat we're going to do, actually, I should have told you about this. I'll tell you about it now. The June bank holiday weekend, which is actually quite soon. It's in about 2.5 weeks, I suppose. Is that right? Yeah, it must be. What day is it today? It's the 11th today, so it's in, yeah. Anyway, it's quite soon. It's a weekend retreat. It's going to be online. But I was talking about the three lakshanas, impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and insubstantiality. Well, there's a set of the gateways to liberation which correspond to the lakshanas, and we're going to be exploring those. So, I've just really touched on them. So the weekend retreat will be about delving into those much more deeply, and they really are gateways to liberation. And then the summer retreat will be the first weekend the first week actually in July. It's a whole 6 days, and we're going to be looking at the Brahma Viharas, the sublime abidings, which is not just metta but also compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. This sort of sequence of positive mental states. So just to let you know about those upcoming events, and also just to remind you about just to ask you for donations. I've done that probably ad nauseum at this stage, but just say it one more time. And just to thank the team again. I know I did this last week, but I'll do it again. Just thanks for being here every week, and just for helping create an atmosphere where people can communicate with each other. And thanks to Stephen for doing the tech. He's been fantastic. He's been on quite a steep learning curve, and he's been doing really brilliantly well. And just thanks for everybody just for coming along and just engaging so wholeheartedly. And this really is the last week now. Yeah, just hopefully see you at some other event sometime. Well, yeah, in person, hopefully it's not too far away, but for the moment at least on Zoom. Okay. Stick around if you've got any questions or anything, but other than that, I'll see you sometime soon.